The future is quite uncertain, and there's no question about it. It's something that has been ancient and is very much human. Because of that, everyone is scared. So I'm gonna kind of go through what that looks like, what that feels like, what it meant for me during a time where I was really, really uncertain in my life, and many of the things I learned through that, and what becomes possible through such difficult times. So we're not just going to be coping with the uncertainty of our collective future. We're going to dive right in, and we're going to talk about how we can actually feel like there is some sense of certainty in where we're going. Welcome to the Bodhisattvism podcast. This is where we talk about well-being that is sustainable for activists and progressives. My name is Gayatri. I use they, them pronouns. I have a master's degree in yoga studies. I'm trained in transformational coaching. And I'm an activist with Sunrise LA, as well as with LA Climate Week. And Bodhisattvism right here, right now, is another activism project of mine. Think of a time when you personally felt very uncertain. How did that feel in your body? So I want us to come to a place where you didn't know what was going to happen in the future, and it felt so incredibly daunting. It felt too large. It felt like too much. This could have been a time when you were maybe selecting a college major. Maybe it was a health diagnosis of your own or family members, or a medical result. This can also be elections every couple of years, whether local, national. It can also be conflict with a parent or a friend or a partner, when you don't know what's going to happen through that. It can also be when you're submitting a letter of request to an entity, maybe a corporation or a government body, as an activist. You don't know what's going to turn out of that. Sometimes you put in so much effort because you want a certain result, and it still feels so large that you can't tell what's going to happen. So let's just be there for a moment. And the reason we do this is in the transformational process. And I'll go deeper into this when I talk about my own personal journey. What it really takes to transform is to deeply understand what is happening first. So when I ask you this, just choose one, the one that's loudest when I ask this question. What does that feel like in your body? What comes up when you bring your mind back to that place that you were before you realized what the outcome was going to be? I bet your body probably felt fragile. It was a really raw moment. You felt scared. I bet you felt really confused and just helpless. Maybe you even felt insecure or unprotected, like there was nobody there for you. Maybe you felt alone. Maybe you had lots of anxiety or sleepless nights, or you just wanted to know the answer, so you would read a lot or watch a lot of videos about it to try to get an answer and try to predict what the future could be, which is where the anxiety could have come from. The mind going in endless loops and spirals. Maybe there was even twinges of grief, having experienced something similar like that before in your life, thinking that it could happen again, so you start to pre-grieve. This sort of uncertainty, I can tell you, is a fear that shakes us to our core. It's a fear that is about our own security and the security of our loved ones. Let's just reflect on what that means. What does security even mean? Yogic monks, sages, sadhus, whatever you may call them, ascetics that practice these principles, they take vows of renunciation. They follow under a guru, a teacher, perhaps a lineage, in order to strip away the things that their mind tells them is necessary for their security. They strip away their jewels. They strip away their family. They strip away fancy foods, comfortable beds. Comfortable? That was my somewhat Indian accent coming out. comfortable beds. Whatever. Hindi was my first language. They do all of this to come back to some core truths. What is it that we actually really need? How tough is our body truly? There are some ascetics that also take the practice on of tapasyas. For example, some monks will raise their hands for the rest of their lives, and then this one arm will just rot away, just to see what is the capability of the human mind and therefore the body. I say all that to say, we don't actually need that much to survive. But our mind is so strong. It is what ancestrally allowed us to continue as a species, that it likes to hoard, it likes to secure, and it often, without the teaching of ethics, perhaps from family or a particular teacher, can even go into unethical means to acquire that control. We today also live within an empire. I'm speaking from the lens of the United States. People collectively come together within societies, within governments, with this mindset of we need to get more and more and more and more for our security. And this is what enraptures us within the curse that is continued colonization of other countries, a climate crisis that we are now obviously living in. There's a statistic that says if all people around the globe were to live the way that Americans do, we would need 3.5 Earths. That doesn't sound like that much, but imagine an Earth. Imagine the resources. Resources is even a controversial word, and I don't like to think of those things that way, but I'm not going to go into that critical theory. Actually, maybe I do care about decolonizing that. We collaborate with the Earth. We, as humans, I believe, are stewards of the Earth. So we cannot just extract things from it as our own. And the word resource implies that the Earth is here for human beings only. It's not a reciprocal relationship. So putting that aside, 1 Earth, 2, 3.5. That is unacceptable. This is a software that runs on our subconscious mind. And I'm going to be speaking from that subconscious mind for my personal story about uncertainty. So what happened for me, with me, to me, was about 9 months ago, a breakup that completely shredded me apart, peeled my reality to the core. This could be a gruesome metaphor, but it truly felt like I was a walking muscle man. I'm imagining from Shingeki no Kyojin, the titans that are just muscle, just kind of like so vulnerable to the world. This person that I deeply loved and invested over a year into building a life with, there is nothing that I could have said or done to change their mind from leaving me, from breaking up with me. And I knew that because I've gone through 2 breakups before with a previous partner. I had no say in that person leaving me. And I'll tell you, y'all, it took me months to record this podcast episode, even though this podcast is probably the most important thing to me right now and has been for the past at least maybe 2 years. I cried on my way here, driving to this park, because of how painful this has been for me. And I'm still excavating learnings, but an uncertainty about my future was the greatest thing that hit me, like a weight just like falling on me. I felt like there was nothing that was truly in my control and that I was a victim to my reality. I actually got to a place where I felt like there were no things in this reality that were actually solid. And it was kind of a spiritual realization from going through such a deep hurt that anything that I have a relationship with, that I may touch or listen to or remember or walk upon or hug, all of that, there was no actual tangible through line. And this was truly shocking, because there's many things that we hold on to, and by we, I mean your brain, my brain, the mind, that is a metaphysical concept that humans have created around the brain to construct our identity. Identity has nothing at its formation. And now that it's been quite a bit of time and I have resourced, how interesting to say that word, right? There is an importance around decolonizing mental health as well. I reached out to get therapy as soon as I could after this breakup to process the pain that happened to me, with me or for me, because I did not want to be a victim to it. I knew that projecting this situation and blaming it all on this person that left me was not going to help. So that was helping me because I realized I wasn't doing the same behavior as I was in my previous breakups. I think it was really powerful for me to learn that anything could happen. There is only my mindset at the end of the day. And this was matching up with my Buddhist and yogic beliefs as well. And I'll get to that later. And I'm particularly excited to talk about śūnyatā in relation to this awakening that I had. And there was some coping mechanisms that were helping me that I'm also going to share. Not that they were unhealthy. I think sometimes it is important to just cope, and that's why we can't truly judge people that are going through really difficult circumstances, whether psychologically or physically, likely both. One of my major coping mechanisms at that time was streaming YouTube videos constantly. I nearly became an expert on attachment styles, but my therapist told me that maybe doing this all the time 24/7 isn't helpful because I was preventing myself from feeling my feelings. And that was a huge realization I had, because I realized that I need to be feeling my feelings. I can't just put a video on and try to explain my way out of it. There was truly no way out of that, and part of me knew intuitively that I would not be able to do anything professionally. As I mentioned, I put a full halt on podcast recording, even though it was what I really wanted to do, because the only thing I could think about was how I was abandoned and rejected. And that was my subconscious tape rolling over and 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 over. Yeah, how many more times can I say over? For probably like 6 months at least. And it still comes up sometimes. But I actually took a break from working. I did not have a job. I lived off my savings, and maybe that's a privilege that many people don't have. I'm incredibly grateful for setting myself up with savings so I could feel it out. But even that to me was proof of how I do already look after myself into the future. So I made these choices. I went to therapy. I researched a lot on YouTube. I took control over my morning and night routine, especially my morning routine, because I struggle with chronic low back pain. And if I don't do cardio, it returns. So I need to keep that up consistently. I was also really serious about my meditation practice. Shout out to Insight Timer. The outcome of this was that I shifted my locus of control to my inside locus, my internal locus. And this helped me see that when I take responsibility for my reality, I see my fear and I can face it. So whether I get back together with this person or whether I don't, I have this baseline of my life where I know how I treat myself. I'm working through the subconscious fears that were incredibly triggered at that time. And the biggest teaching I was able to absorb from this was that what I feared became true. I feared being left, abandoned, because that was my experience from my past relationship. That included not being chosen, rejected, not being good enough or worthy. I know from my inner Buddha nature, a place that is innocent and loving and compassionate, that this is not how good, long-lasting relationships stay that way. And that's why I do that work internally. An astrologer told me a couple weeks before that breakup happened that this podcast would be a way that I process my internal pain and teach others through it. And that was so transformational for me because I did not have to pause it. I chose to pause it. And now I'm back after having processed things that I was able to grieve and let go of and see as my subconscious fears. If we are dominantly afraid of the collective future of ours, or a personal future, or one that's intermingled, because they are going to be intermingled, that's what's going to come true. How do we actually shift that? Maybe you've heard of the phrase radical imagination. This is a really deep concept, actually. It is so beautiful that this idea is getting more and more and more popular because imagination is manifestation. Where we start from inside, what we believe will happen is what will happen. And that is from the place of our subconscious. So let's talk about how we actually go into the subconscious and rework that. I'm going to bring in some, classic law of attraction stuff. And I'm also going to bring in some Buddhist philosophy. I'm also just going to throw out there that sometimes what blocks me from bodhisattvism teaching is feeling like I need to be purist with it, like teach only yoga and Buddhism and not other things. But these are things that have deeply helped me, and I think they are very powerful. Imagination. Imagination is such a pure act of love and trust and faith that I think we should be doing it a lot more. Imagination is also a place where we can first get in touch with our internal state because we're doing it all the time. Whenever you drifted off during this video or whatever happens in your mind when you're in a car, I recently learned that's something called highway hypnosis, and it's like a form of dissociation where your mind just trails off, especially if you're like on a route that you usually go on or something like that. Imagination also happens as we're falling asleep, as we're waking up, very akin to the dream state. And I used to make videos on this. You can check it out earlier in my YouTube channel if you'd like to see that. When I used to go by Goddess Gaia, I stopped resonating with that name, I guess. So let's take a minute for us to close our eyes. If you're driving, of course, don't close your eyes. But if you're just listening to this casually without driving, it's just going to be for 10 to 30 seconds, whatever it ends up being. Think about the future, our collective future. What is it that you see? I still see cars on highways, and I see gardens coming down of tall buildings. So it seems like a mixture of solar punk and our current reality, at least here in LA, of Car City. Just take note of that. And whatever comes up for you is what your subconscious sees about the future. Rewiring that takes intentional imagination, like in Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson's book. I think that book, What If We Get It Right, is so incredibly powerful. Why aren't we asking those types of questions to evoke positive imagination, right? Like, what if my next relationship actually lasts my lifetime the way I would like it to? What if? And that is when I can come from a place of faith and innocence and trust and true love. I also want to speak to that feeling I had that there was no basis to reality. In Buddhism, there's a couple concepts that can encapsulate this. They're all sort of interconnected, which is so beautiful because one of them is actually pratītyasamutpāda, which is dependent origination. It's sometimes also called dependent co-origination or interdependence. And that speaks to how everything is interrelated, but that there is nothing at the core of it, which is śūnyatā, which is actually emptiness. So how can there be emptiness while also being interdependence? Well, this is what the monks have determined, and it's not what I'm going to say you should blindly believe. It's something you should experiment and test on your own. It's something that I found for myself to be true because I found that there's no true grounds to anything, and I could actually mold it based on what is assigned to me within my locus of control. And the pratītyasamutpāda part, the interdependence part, was how everything was interrelated. The wounds of that partner I had and my own wounds came together to interact and create this story for me so that I could awaken even more, remember emptiness, and remember even more of my power and what it is that I'm here to do. Dependent co-origination is also a feeling I've had while sitting in community, in Sangha, and realizing, I'm looking around because I'm like imagining the scene that hit me a couple months ago when I realized I'm only one cog within so many other network of cogs. My cog here is my locus of control, right? And by doing this, I shake the foundation of the people that I'm connected to and the other sentient beings and the conditions around me. So if I feel like there is actually nothing solid to anything, that is an empowering feeling. This also ties in with the concept of impermanence, which is anicca in Buddhism. And impermanence can feel very disempowering sometimes. There are people, even that I'm related to, that are very afraid of change. And this actually goes hand in hand with something I spoke about earlier about our mind finding security in our identity. And that identity is tied to certain things that are stable, like maybe a home that is in a certain location, a certain income level, a certain type of aesthetic that we wear, even a partner that we associate our identity with, maybe a particular community that we are ingrained into. Everything, all of this, there is at the core of it, śūnyatā, emptiness. None of it is truly solid according to Buddhism, according to yoga. And part of that is this idea that it is actually neutral. Śūnyatā also indicates that there's nothing that is truly good or bad, which doesn't mean that we act uncompassionately in an evil way, in a selfish way. We don't use ethics, although there actually have been many yogis throughout texts that have done very disciplinary actions towards themselves. Like, for example, the individual character within the Ramayana, whose name was Ravan, he did lots of meditation practice to gain the evil powers that he did. So that indicates that even spirituality is neutral, and we get to move with intention and with morality and with ethics when we do things. That's also why I care about teaching from that place, because I want the world to be better. I want to empower people like you who are progressive and want a better political and ecological climate for all of us. I don't want to just teach anybody that is here for their personal gain alone. So going back to anicca, impermanence, change is actually neutral. And this goes to my final point about story. Story ties in with both imagination and these Buddhist concepts I've mentioned around change, emptiness, interdependence, because if everything is neutral, if even the things in our subconscious, our fears or our hopes, if they're neutral, we can actually detach ourselves from them having power over our lives and over our futures. It's kind of like seeing reality like a game. Reality is kind of moldable. Like, when I'm choosing an empowering mindset rather than a victim mindset, I can create my own meaning. I can create my own story. And as groups of people, as communities, as society, we can create our own story about what's happening right now. And we can see the change that is happening as an opportunity to step into our roles. What is it that we have skill within? What is it that really lights up our hearts? And this is coming from what place? Do we want fear to write our story? Or do we want hope, love, trust, faith, innocence, Buddhahood to write our story? And this is our karmic responsibility. Writing our own story is our responsibility. I said that again because it is so important for that to sink in. I created my own story from this breakup that I will not let it shake me. I'm going to dust myself off. I'm going to connect myself with the relationships that are empowering me. I could have said resources, but it said relationships. The relationship to my therapist, the relationship to my community, my sangha, the relationship to my rabbit in physical touch and care and all the other things that she provides, my relationship to my own body, my relationship to my own mind, my relationship to my habits and mindset, my relationship to my family and what traumas I may have inherited from them. Am I going to be a victim to that, or am I going to see that as them having done their best and this is now my responsibility to heal the generational trauma that I've inherited? All of these resources / relationships are part of what allow me to write my story. This is what allows us to write our story. So, what is our story? Are you part of the Bodhisattvism story? I would invite you into my newsletter. I would like to establish a relationship with you in my digital sangha and learn from you and learn with you on this journey as a progressive, as a spiritual person, understanding that the principles that I practice have an impact on all sentient beings. And I choose for that to happen because it's empowering for all of us, actually. So you can sign up for that newsletter in the description below. And I'm so grateful for you for joining me. I give you a big hug. We can breathe together for a moment. And I sign off. Thank you. May all beings everywhere be free from suffering, and may our thoughts, words, and actions align to create this reality. Thank you for listening. I will see you either in your inbox or my moon rituals if you decide to check those out.